Hey, everybody. There has been a lot of talk the last few days, and I'm sure this talk will continue as the first few weeks of school start to unravel for many people. There is something called a comparable IEP. IEPs technically never expire. The only way to not have an IEP is to, as a parent, revoke services, or if the child has graduated out of needing services. And so, therefore, the team has decided, when I say graduated, that it doesn't have to be at the end of high school or elementary school. A child can exit out of special education, is probably the better way to term that, when the team decides that the child no longer needs services. Outside of those instances, IEPs never expire. They might become inactive, and that is why this talk is happening right now, because a lot of parents during the pandemic chose to keep their kids home and homeschool. And now that schools are potentially opening back up, parents are now taking their kids back to school. So, what is the school's obligation? My understanding, and if you've never heard me say this before, I am not a lawyer. I am not giving you legal advice. I am just telling you where I understand the law. And my understanding from the federal law is it doesn't say, to my knowledge, that IEPs just go dormant. What it does say is that at least once a year, the IEP needs to be looked at. So that's where you have what's called an annual review once a year, so that you get updated information and the whole team comes together and decides, are the goals that the child was working on during the last IEP still appropriate? Do we need to change them? How do we need to change them? What about the minutes? And you go through the full IEP as a team and discuss what should happen for the upcoming IEP. If that doesn't happen, then the school is considered in non-compliance. And so that is oftentimes where people, I think, get confused as to whether or not an IEP becomes void or it expires, because they think, well, the school didn't hold their annual review within the time frame they were supposed to, and so now there's no IEP. No, that is not how I've ever had anyone present it to me. So again, if it's past that annual review due date, that just makes the school non-compliant for holding a yearly review of the IEP. It does not void the special services. The same thing happens with those families who have taken their children out of school during the pandemic and homeschooled them. If they had an IEP prior to coming out from the pandemic time, their IEP is still active. Their special education services, their eligibility is still active. I want to change how I've said this. Their IEP is still in place. Their eligibility never expires. So what is happening with a lot of school districts, and I've been in a few of these meetings myself, is what they call a comparable or a comparable IEP. This is the same basic thing that would happen if you moved during a school year, and the new school would do a comparable IEP to what you had had at the previous school you were in, until they can take their own data, until they can get updated information, and until they can see, again, if those goals and those minutes and all the related services are still necessary for your child to receive at that school. Just because maybe they had OT at one school doesn't necessarily mean they'll need OT at another school because of the way the school runs on a daily basis. So being able to look at the whole picture of a school's program. So one of the things that is scary right now for a lot of parents is it's been a full school year and then some for some families since their child's IEP was last looked at. And so the placement of the child is still the same placement on the continuum of placement as it was when they left for the pandemic. It's only going to be 4 to 6 weeks that placement should stay without being looked at. You want to try, if this is happening to you, you want to get a meeting on the books at your child's school within 4 to 6 weeks. And the reason I say not immediately is because you want to give the school the opportunity to gather data so that they can show all the progress that your child made or didn't make during the time that they were not in school last year and maybe even a few extra months. I hope all of that makes sense. I'm going to stop here because I could ramble on about this, but I feel like I've explained it. If I haven't, please reach out to me. Or if you are in that situation and you need someone to explain it to you a little bit more thoroughly, you want someone to attend the IEP meeting with you, please reach out to me and we will discuss how we can work together and make things happen. If you just want me to look over any data, I love to look at data. I'm a data nerd. I love to dig through it and find all the little idiosyncrasies that are in there and really break it apart and really pick out certain things. I'm happy to do that for you as well. Okay, so as a summary, IEPs do not expire. They do not become void. They become inactive. And if you're going back to school this year and your child had an IEP and you pulled them out to homeschool them during the pandemic, the school by law is required to do a comparable or a comparable IEP to the last IEP on record. Okay. And so you want to understand that that's only going to be like 4 to 6 weeks so that the school has time to update data to see where your child is now and to see what is appropriate for your child at this point in their life. And yes, they're going to start with what they know from before, but they have to. They're not doing that maliciously. They have to. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.